Cancer. Ugh. Yeah. It's just one of those words, right? Like gives you shivers. It's been this huge mystery forever, it seems like. But what if the answer's been right in front of us this whole time?
Mm-hmm.
What if the key to understanding this whole cancer thing is, well, looking at some of the biggest creatures on Earth?
It really makes you wonder. It's like you've got these massive animals, blue whales, for example.
Yeah, they're gigantic.
Like huge, over 100 feet long, trillions of cells.
Yeah.
But their cancer rates, way lower than you'd expect.
So weird. You'd think an animal that big would just be, well,
A walking tumor.
Yeah, basically. Doesn't really make sense. So that's what we're diving into today. Peto's paradox, it's called. Why these big animals, these gentle giants, don't get cancer as much as we'd think.
Exactly. It's a real head scratcher.
Yeah.
And to really get it, we got to start small, like cellular level small.
Okay, so back to basics.
Basically, cancer happens when cells divide, but there's a mistake, an error. And that leads to out-of-control growth.
Ah, so it's like a glitch in the system.
Yeah, think of it like that. And often these glitches involve mutations in genes, the ones that control the cell cycle.
So those genes are like the instruction manual for how cells are supposed to behave.
Exactly. And we've got some genes, oncogenes we call them, that when they're mutated, they actually make things worse. They hit the gas pedal on cell division, basically.
Uh-oh. That's not good.
Not good at all. But then you've got the tumor suppressor genes. They're the brakes. They can stop cell division, even trigger cell death if things are getting out of hand.
Like a kill switch.
Kind of like that, yeah. Keeps things from spiraling out of control.
So it's this constant battle inside our bodies, oncogenes pushing for growth, and tumor suppressors trying to keep things in check.
You got it. Delicate balance. And one theory about why these big animals don't have as much cancer is that they've just got better brakes. More robust tumor suppressor mechanisms.
Makes sense. If you live longer, have more cells, you need better defenses.
Mm-hmm.
But how did they get those better defenses?
Evolution, baby. Survival of the fittest,
Right.
Over millions of years, the animals with better tumor suppression, they lived longer, had more babies, passed those good genes on down the line.
So it's like natural selection was weeding out the ones that couldn't fight off cancer as well.
Exactly. And we see evidence of this. Elephants, for example, they've got extra copies of this gene, TP53. Super important tumor suppressor.
More copies, more protection.
You got it. Like having a backup generator just in case.
Wow. It's like these big animals are really prepared for the cancer fight.
They've had a long time to figure things out. But there's another piece to this puzzle, something even weirder. Hypertumors.
Hypertumors. Okay, now I'm really curious. What in the world are those?
So imagine you've got a tumor growing rapidly, dividing like crazy, but within that tumor, some cells mutate even more. And some of those mutations can actually lead to cells that turn against the original tumor.
Wait a minute, so cancer can get cancer? That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's like a tumor fighting itself. These hypertumor cells, they're even more aggressive. They hog resources, basically starve the original tumor.
Whoa, so it's like a rebellion within a rebellion. That's wild.
It is pretty wild. And these hypertumors might be a big part of why these big animals don't get overwhelmed by cancer.
I see. So it's like a tumor that would be huge and deadly in a human might not even be noticeable in a whale, right?
Exactly. And if they've got lots of these small tumors constantly kept in check by hypertumors, maybe that's why they don't have the same problems we do.
It's almost like they've got this built-in system for keeping cancer under control.
It's definitely a fascinating theory, and there's some early research that supports it. We've seen hypertumors in dogs, for example, with certain types of cancer.
So maybe this hypertumor thing isn't just limited to the super huge animal.
Maybe not, but there's still a lot to learn. And we shouldn't forget that there might be other explanations for Peto's paradox, too. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Right. So we've got evolution, we've got these crazy hypertumors. What else could be going on here?
Well, there's another angle we haven't touched on yet, something that might surprise you. Metabolism.
Metabolism. Like how fast our bodies burn energy. How does that play into cancer?
It's a good question. Let's dive into that next. Okay, so metabolism. It might seem a little out there, but how fast our bodies work, like at the cellular level, could be linked to cancer.
So you're saying like the pace of life for our cells could affect how likely they are to become cancerous.
Exactly. Metabolism, it's all the chemical stuff happening inside our cells, growth, division, all that. And Every time a cell divides, there's a chance for something to go wrong, like a little error in the DNA copying.
And those errors can lead to mutations and then potentially cancer.
Right. More division, more chances for things to get messed up.
Makes sense. So where do the big animals fit in here? Do they just have slower metabolisms?
That's one theory. Bigger animals, slower metabolisms. It's like the tortoise and the hare, Slower and steadier wins the race.
So their cells are dividing less often, fewer chances for those errors. So does that mean all slow-moving animals are like immune to cancer?
If only it were that simple. It's not a guarantee, more like one factor among many. We're still figuring out all the connections.
I see. So maybe a slower pace of life helps, but it's not the whole story. What other stuff going on in the cells? Like we talked about DNA repair before. Could that be different in different animals too?
Absolutely. If there's damage to the DNA, gotta fix it fast. Even with a slower metabolism, mistakes happen.
Right. So some animals might just be better at patching things up before they get out of control.
Exactly. And some studies suggest that's the case. Elephants, they've got extra copies of a gene called LIF6. Helps repair these double-strand breaks in DNA.
Which are bad, right? Double-strand breaks.
Yeah, those are the really nasty ones, like cutting a rope in half.
Makes sense. So elephants have got like a whole repair crew standing by.
That's one way to think about it. And then there's bowhead whales. Those guys can live over 200 years. And they've got this special version of the ERCC1 gene, helps repair damage from UV radiation and toxins.
Wow, 200 years. So that gene must be doing something right. Makes you wonder if we could learn something from these animals, help us humans fight cancer better.
That's the hope. A lot of research is looking at these repair mechanisms, trying to figure out how they work if we can use that knowledge for new treatments.
So it's like looking to nature for inspiration almost.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Definitely. There's so much we can learn from these animals. But there's another piece to the puzzle too, something we haven't talked about yet. The microbiome.
The microbiome? Wait, you mean like the bacteria and stuff that live in our gut? What's that got to do with cancer?
More than you might think. There's a whole world of research emerging that shows the microbiome can both help and hurt when it comes to cancer.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Tell me more.
It's all about balance. Some bacteria in our gut, they can produce stuff that actually damages DNA or triggers inflammation. And those are both linked to cancer.
So it's like we've got these little freeloaders living in us, and some of them are actually making things worse.
Kind of, yeah. But it's not all bad. Some bacteria are actually helpful. They produce stuff that boosts our immune system or even directly fights tumor growth.
Okay, so it's like a delicate ecosystem. Some good guys, some bad guys, and we need to figure out how to keep things in balance.
Exactly. And now researchers are looking at whether those big animals, the ones that seem to resist cancer, might have special microbiomes that contribute to that.
So maybe there's like a secret recipe for a cancer-fighting gut? Could we change our own microbiome to lower our risk?
That's the big question. Lots of research looking into that. Things like diet changes, even fecal transplants. It's a whole new frontier.
Wow, who knew gut bacteria could be so important for cancer? This whole Peto's paradox thing has been full of surprises.
It just goes to show there's always more to learn, and sometimes the answers are hiding in the most unexpected places.
Well said. So we've talked about evolution, these crazy hypertumors, metabolism, and now the microbiome. A lot of factors at play here.
It's complex, that's for sure. But every piece we uncover brings us closer to understanding cancer and hopefully to finding better ways to prevent and treat it.
So what's next? Where do we go from here? We've talked about the why of Peto's paradox. Now, what about the how? How are scientists using this knowledge to actually develop new treatments?
Great question. There's some really exciting research happening right now. Let's dive into that next.
So we've been on this deep dive exploring Peto's paradox, figuring out why big animals don't get as much cancer as we'd expect. But now I'm curious, what are scientists actually doing with all this information? Like, can we use it to help humans fight cancer better?
Oh, absolutely. Peto's paradox has really sparked some incredible research. Scientists are taking what they've learned from these animals and trying to apply it to human health.
That's so cool. What are some of the most promising areas right now?
Well, one thing that's got everyone excited is developing drugs that basically act like tumor suppressor genes.
Ah, yeah. Those genes that keep cell division in check.
Exactly. So the idea is, can we create drugs that boost the activity of those genes or even replace them if they're not working properly?
So it's like giving our bodies a little extra help in the cancer fight.
Exactly. Reinforce those natural defenses. And there are already some drugs showing real promise. PARP inhibitors, for example. They're being used for certain cancers, especially ones linked to mutations in the BRCA genes.
BRCA genes. Those are the ones often tied to breast and ovarian cancer.
Yep, those are the ones. And these PRP inhibitors, they basically exploit a weakness in cancer cells that have those BRCA mutations, prevent them from repairing their DNA properly, so they die off.
So it's like finding a vulnerability in the enemy's defenses and targeting it specifically. Pretty clever.
It is. And it's not just about boosting tumor suppressors. Scientists are also looking at ways to target oncogenes, those genes that can actually drive cancer growth.
So it's like a two-pronged attack. Hit the brakes and cut the gas at the same time.
You got it. And there's a whole class of drugs called tyrosine kinase inhibitors that are already making a big difference for certain cancers, like chronic myeloid leukemia. They block the activity of specific oncogenes.
Wow, so they're basically shutting down the signals that tell cancer cells to grow uncontrollably.
Exactly. And the great thing about these targeted therapies is they often have fewer side effects than traditional chemotherapy.
That's a huge plus. So it's about finding more precise ways to fight cancer, less damage to the rest of the body.
Absolutely. Less carpet bombing, more surgical strikes.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So what about the other stuff we talked about, like the metabolic differences and DNA repair mechanisms? Any promising leads there?
Definitely. There's a lot of research looking into drugs that can tweak the metabolism of cancer cells, slow them down by messing with their energy sources.
Trim out, basically.
Exactly. And there's also work being done on boosting DNA repair mechanisms in healthy cells, make them more resilient to damage, lower the risk of cancer developing in the first place.
So it's like giving our cells an extra layer of armor. That's really cool.
It is. And let's not forget about the microbiome. Researchers are looking at ways to manipulate those gut bacteria to give our immune system a boost, help it fight off cancer more effectively.
It's amazing to think that tiny little bacteria could play such a big role in all of this.
Right. It just goes to show how interconnected everything is. Our genes, our environment, even the microbes living inside us, it all matters.
This whole deep dive into Peto's paradox has been so fascinating. It really feels like we're on the cusp of some major breakthroughs in cancer treatment.
I agree. Studying these amazing animals has opened up a whole new world of possibilities. Who knows what the future holds?
Well said. I think this has given us all a lot to think about. Not just about cancer, but about the power of scientific research and how much we can learn from the natural world.
Absolutely. And I think it gives us hope. Cancer is a tough opponent, but we're learning more every day. And with every new discovery, we get a little bit closer to finding a cure.
That's a great point. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the fascinating world of Peto's paradox. We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. And until next time, stay curious.